James says something here on page 15 that I think is important, and perhaps important not only in the context of the essay, but in the context of this whole class, and that is in the beginning of the second paragraph when he says, "No concrete test of what is really true has ever been agreed upon." This goes pretty deep into the things that we've been reading. I would say back to Plato's Meno. So, Meno's fascinating question and a paradox. How will we search for something that we don't know anything about? And even if we were to stumble upon it, how would we know that that's what we were looking for? This seems to be one aspect of that. That is, without a concrete test of what is true, or a criterion of right and wrong, as Sextus Empiricus put it, how would we ever know that we know anything? And I think that William James is fully ready to accept the consequences of that. One of the things that he says in this essay is that there are different philosophical attitudes towards truth. And one of them is the empiricist, if I can find it, excuse me, paging through so much. One is the empiricist way, and the other is the absolutist way. This is the beginning of section 5 on page 12. He says, "It will be observed that for the purposes of this discussion, we are on dogmatic ground. Ground, I mean, which leaves systematic philosophical skepticism altogether out of account." Interesting. Again, thinking back to Sextus Empiricus, he's admitting that he is not a skeptic, that he's a dogmatist of a certain sort. And that has to be, what kind of dogmatist is he? Well, he says the postulate that there is truth, that is, that truth is possible, that there is such a thing, and that it is the destiny of our minds to attain it, we are deliberately resolving to make, though the skeptic will not make it. It is thinking of the kind of skepticism that Hume describes. James is saying, I am not that kind of skeptic. I am, to a certain extent, a dogmatist. To the extent that I believe that truth is possible, that we can get truth and it's worth searching for the truth. He continues, we part company with him, the skeptic, therefore, absolutely at this point. But the faith that truth exists, he's admitting that the very notion that there is such a thing as truth and that it's possible is a matter of faith, not of reason. But the faith that truth exists and that our minds can find it may be held in two ways. We may talk of the empiricist way and of the absolutist way of believing in the truth. Now, empiricist means based upon experience. And that's what he regards himself as an empiricist. The absolutists in this matter say that we not only can attain to knowing truth, but can know when we have attained to knowing it. While the empiricists think that although we may attain it, we cannot infallibly know when. That's a very interesting distinction, isn't it? The absolutist believes that truth is possible, and moreover, when we get the truth, we can know that we have it. Whereas the empiricist says that truth is possible, but we can never know when we have it or whether we actually do have it. That's an interesting category and a way of categorizing himself, William James, as an empiricist, as someone who believes that truth is possible, it's worth searching for truth, but we can never really be sure in any particular instance whether we have it. This leads, I think, to the other interesting contrast. If this contrast between the empiricist and the absolutist is one contrast, the other contrast is between two different goals in thinking. And this is what he describes in section 7 here on page 17. This contrast between these two different goals or these two different imperatives right here. We must know the truth and we must avoid error. James's point is that these two imperatives are entirely different things. They're not two sides of the same coin, let's say the coin of inquiry. They are two different goals, and they have to be prioritized. Which is more important, to know the truth or to avoid error? His categorization of Clifford is that Clifford is wholly committed to the latter. The most important thing is to avoid error. Therefore, if you don't have adequate evidence for an opinion, don't have any opinion at all. Because although, of course, you don't know anything, at least you've avoided the error of thinking that you know when you really don't. That's pretty important in the history of philosophy. I mean, on Clifford's behalf, because that's basically how Socrates described himself. He says, I don't know anything, but at least I don't think that I know when I don't know. So Clifford, if he is saying that we must avoid error by insisting that we have adequate proof, evidence for our beliefs, he's connecting up with Socrates in a very important way. And so what William James says is a departure from Socrates, because he chooses the first as being more important. Of course, we must avoid error, but knowing the truth, that's more important. And what does that mean? Well, uh, to prioritize knowing the truth over avoiding error is to be willing to take a greater risk of believing lies. But that's kind of like the whole point of the essay, is that we should be willing to take that risk when it is appropriate. That's important. Now, one of the things that William James is very clear about is that we can't just believe whatever we want. There are facts in this world. Although he says, as I said at the beginning of this talk, that he says there's no concrete criterion or rule for when we have the truth. He does believe in facts, and that we simply must accept facts, and that especially in some things in life, we must be willing to avoid error rather than gain truth. And that would be in science, sometimes at least, and in ordinary life. But that we must be willing, in some cases, and this is where the idea of a forced decision comes in. That is, most of the things that we're called upon to believe or not believe in life don't really make a lot of difference. Pretty trivial. But there are some options that we have to consider, which are much more important. And he is thinking of things like religion and morality. Uh, as he says here at the end of this section, page 22, the question next arises, are there not somewhere forced options in our speculative questions? And can we, as men who may be interested at least as much in positively gaining truth as in merely escaping dupery, always wait with impunity till the course of evidence shall have arrived? This is where the real relevance or meaning, sense of the title of the essay, The Will to Believe, comes in, that there are some situations in which we must let our passional or other than rational nature take over in terms of what we choose to believe. And that goes to this idea of, I'll end it real quick here on page 18, talking about A, B, C, and D. Sometimes you have to take a chance on believing A, because the even if you don't have adequate evidence, because A may be so important that it's worth risking being wrong about A, if you get what I'm saying. In the Clifford, strictly rational, skeptical view, you don't accept anything until there's adequate evidence. But sometimes that A is so important and the truths that it may lead to are so important, and we have to risk allowing ourselves to be wrong about A for our own good, you might say.